Under the scorching North African sun on that early March day in 1943, German soldiers laboured at the docks of Tunis with an exhaustion that went bone deep. The Mediterranean heat pressed down like a physical weight as supply officers barked orders at platoons who wrestled enormous wooden crates from the holds of transport vessels. Each container of ammunition tipped the scales at more than 200 pounds, demanding the coordinated effort of 4 men working with rope systems and makeshift wooden ramps just to move the cargo from ship to shore. This was the German way of handling military supplies, built upon rigid organisation, unwavering discipline, and the sheer physical endurance of Wehrmacht soldiers who knew nothing but hard work. Just 4 months before this sweltering afternoon, American troops had come ashore in Morocco and Algeria, launching what military historians would record as Operation Torch. Intelligence reports trickling back to German command mentioned something curious about American supply operations, something about mechanical devices the Americans employed at their depot facilities, equipment that appeared to eliminate much of the back-breaking manual labour that German military tradition considered essential to maintaining proper soldierly character. The logistical doctrine of the Wehrmacht, honed through successive campaigns across Poland, through France, and deep into the Russian expanse, regarded such mechanical assistance with suspicion and contempt, viewing it as clear evidence of American physical softness and moral inadequacy. German officers asked themselves what kind of fighting man required a machine to accomplish what his own 2 hands and strong back could manage through proper application of effort and will. This dismissive perspective toward American innovations in materials handling would emerge as among the most expensive miscalculations the Wehrmacht would make throughout the entire North African campaign. What German quartermasters interpreted as weakness and decadence was in reality a revolutionary reconception of how logistics should function in modern industrialized warfare, an approach that would contribute substantially to burying Rommel's Africa Corps beneath an endless stream of efficiently managed and delivered war materials. The humble forklift, ridiculed by German supply officers as an unnecessary indulgence for troops too soft for real soldiering, actually represented a fundamental philosophical divergence in understanding what industrial warfare demanded, a difference that would prove absolutely decisive as the campaign unfolded. The German military machine operating in 1943 functioned according to principles and practices that would have seemed entirely familiar to commanders from the century before. Despite pioneering the revolutionary blitzkrieg tactics that emphasized unprecedented speed and mechanization in offensive combat operations, German logistics arrangements remained astonishingly primitive when examined closely. A typical German infantry division travelling with its complete supply train employed 256 motorised trucks, yet these were supplemented by an astounding 2,652 horses, the entire operation requiring more than 4,000 men dedicated solely to the task of moving supplies from railway termination points forward to the combat units. This represented a massive investment of manpower in logistics functions, leaving correspondingly fewer soldiers available for actual fighting. The contradiction inherent in German military organisation stood out starkly when examined with any objectivity. The same armed forces that had developed sophisticated armoured vehicles, created advanced tactical radio communication systems, and pioneered revolutionary operational concepts that changed modern warfare forever, still moved the majority of its supplies using methods and techniques that Napoleon Bonaparte would have immediately recognized and understood. German soldiers formed human chains to load ammunition boxes, rolled fuel barrels laboriously up wooden planking, and carried supplies strapped to their backs across distances that American troops traversed using mechanized transportation that preserved their energy for combat. This wasn't merely a question of available resources or industrial capacity. It reflected a deep philosophical chasm separating German and American thinking about the fundamental nature of military efficiency and what constituted proper use of soldiers' time and strength. American industrial thinking had evolved along a completely different trajectory. The Clark Equipment Company, operating out of Buchanan, Michigan, had been engaged in developing powered materials handling equipment since 1917, the year they created their truck tractor designed primarily for moving materials efficiently within their own factory operations. This innovation wasn't driven by military requirements or government contracts, but rather by the relentless demands of American consumer capitalism, which required ever more efficient methods of moving manufactured goods through factories, storing them in warehouses, and distributing them through commercial centers serving a continent-spanning market. By 1924, Clark engineers had modified their basic design by adding fork attachments and a vertical mast assembly, creating what outside observers would begin to recognize as the modern forklift in its essential form. The evolution of this technology continued steadily through the 1930s as American industry refined and improved the basic concept. In 1938, Clark introduced what they called the car loader, recognized today as the world's first genuinely modern, short-coupled internal combustion forklift truck. This compact and highly maneuverable design could lift substantial loads, stack them vertically in tight spaces, and operate effectively in the confined areas typical of warehouse and factory environments. By 1942, as the United States mobilized its entire industrial capacity for total war, Clark had developed battery-powered forklift models capable of operating for an entire work shift on a single electrical charge, completely eliminating the need for refueling during critical supply operations that couldn't afford interruption or delay. When the United States entered the global conflict, this civilian technology underwent immediate adaptation for military applications. Clark became a major contractor supplying forklift trucks and tow tractors to United States Armed Forces throughout the war years. Military procurement records from the period clearly indicate that by 1943, American forces were systematically deploying forklifts at every major supply depot, port facility, and airfield across the entire North African theatre of operations. These machines weren't regarded as luxuries or conveniences by American military planners, but rather as essential force multipliers that fundamentally transformed the basic mathematics of military logistics and supply chain management in ways that traditional methods simply couldn't match. The impact became immediately apparent wherever American supply operations functioned in North Africa. At American-controlled ports like Oran and Casablanca, a single soldier operating a forklift could completely unload an entire truck in just 15 minutes, accomplishing a task that required a dozen German soldiers laboring for more than an hour using traditional manual methods. The forklift operator remained relatively fresh and capable of continuing work after many hours of continuous operations, while the German manual labor teams found themselves physically exhausted after moving just a few tons of supplies through sheer muscle power. This advantage wasn't simply about speed of operations, though that mattered enormously. It concerned the ability to sustain operations continuously over extended time periods without degradation of efficiency. American supply operations could function around the clock 24 hours each day, with operators working in rotating shifts, while German supply operations slowed dramatically and often ground to a complete halt as soldiers reached the limits of physical endurance. The battle that erupted at Kasserine Pass in February 1943 provided German officers their first close examination of American logistics methods in action. Though the battle itself resulted in a German tactical victory on the battlefield, captured American supply installations revealed a level of material abundance that absolutely stunned Wehrmacht quartermasters who inspected them. The sheer quantity of supplies impressed them certainly, though that alone was remarkable enough. But what truly shocked German logistics experts was the systematic organization made possible through the systematic use of mechanical handling equipment they had never encountered before. Supplies sat arranged on standardized wooden pallets, organized in precise rows with clearly marked lanes providing access for forklift operation, everything labeled and inventoried with a level of precision that manual handling methods could never hope to achieve under field conditions. German logistics officers observing American supply operations from concealed positions through their field glasses noted the presence of small vehicles sporting protruding fork assemblies that moved continuously between towering stacks of supplies, lifting and transporting loads that would have required entire squads of German soldiers to handle through manual methods. The American operators sat in relative comfort, protected from the merciless desert sun by overhead metal guards, moving tons of material without any apparent physical effort or strain. To German observers, whose entire military culture had conditioned them to view logistics as a fundamental test of soldierly character and physical fortitude, this mechanized approach seemed almost decadent, a symptom of the physical and moral weakness they had been taught to expect from Americans. The raw numbers revealed the true magnitude of American production capacity and logistics superiority in ways that couldn't be explained away through ideology. American industry during the war years produced 297,000 aircraft of all types, 193,000 artillery pieces of various calibers, 86,000 armored vehicles, including tanks and tank destroyers, and more than 2 million military trucks of various specifications. But raw production represented only one part of the equation facing the Wehrmacht. The ability to move these enormous quantities of supplies efficiently from American factory floors across the Atlantic Ocean to North Africa battlefields required a logistics revolution in thinking and practice, and the forklift exemplified this transformation perfectly. Consider the complete journey required for ammunition to travel from an American munitions factory to the front lines in Tunisia. At the manufacturing facility, forklifts loaded palletized ammunition containers directly onto waiting railroad cars. At East Coast port facilities like New York and Norfolk, forklifts transferred these standardized pallets efficiently from railroad cars onto Liberty ships designed specifically to accommodate them. Upon arrival at North African ports following the Atlantic crossing, forklifts operating continuously unloaded the ships and transferred pallets onto waiting military trucks for inland transportation. At intermediate supply depots, forklifts organized and stacked supplies in systematic arrangements allowing easy access and inventory management. While forklifts remained comparatively rare at forward supply points located near active combat zones due to terrain limitations and tactical considerations, their overwhelming impact on rear area efficiency freed enormous numbers of personnel for assignment to frontline combat units instead of logistics duties. German logistics operations, by stark contrast, depended entirely on manual labor at every single stage of the supply chain from factory to foxhole. German soldiers hand-loaded individual artillery shells and ammunition boxes onto trains using human muscle and simple tools. At port facilities, human chains passed supplies literally from hand to hand in ancient fashion. Ships underwent unloading box by individual box, barrel by single barrel, a process consuming days for what American methods accomplished in hours. Supply dumps frequently became chaotic accumulations rather than organized warehouse facilities, with materials piled haphazardly wherever space permitted rather than arranged systematically for efficient retrieval. The mathematics proved absolutely inexorable and unforgiving. Moving identical tonnage of supplies required far more German soldiers dedicating far more time to logistics tasks, and critically, those soldiers arrived at the front lines already physically exhausted from their supply handling duties rather than fresh and ready for combat. The extreme temperature conditions characteristic of North Africa made this fundamental disparity even more pronounced and operationally significant. In the crushing heat that regularly exceeded 120 degrees Fahrenheit in the shade, German soldiers performing heavy manual labor rapidly became heat casualties requiring medical attention. Dehydration, heat exhaustion, and potentially fatal heat stroke decimated German logistics units at rates that severely impaired their operational capacity. American forklift operators, working their entire shifts from seated positions, often under metal shade providing protection from direct sunlight, preserved their energy and maintained their health throughout extended operations. A single heat casualty among a German manual supply handling team might represent a 20% reduction in that team's total handling capacity, a loss that couldn't easily be replaced. A heat casualty among American forklift operators could be rapidly replaced by bringing in another trained operator to continue operations without significant interruption. The German High Command's response to detailed reports describing American mechanical handling equipment revealed a fundamental and ultimately fatal misunderstanding of modern industrial warfare's requirements. Orders transmitted from Berlin headquarters emphasized traditional German military virtues, including better organization, stricter enforcement of discipline, and longer working hours extracted from already exhausted troops. German officers in the field received instructions to inspire their men toward greater physical efforts through patriotic speeches and emotional appeals to warrior spirit and German martial tradition. What these units actually needed were machines to multiply their efforts. What they received instead were speeches and exhortations that changed nothing. Some German logistics officers who had worked in German industrial facilities before their military service understood perfectly well the multiplication of human effort that mechanical handling equipment provided in civilian applications. These officers wrote detailed reports urging immediate adoption of similar equipment for military logistics operations. Their reports encountered deep skepticism from superior officers who viewed mechanical assistance as clear evidence of declining warrior spirit, seeing it as an unacceptable concession to weakness rather than a practical solution to operational problems. The Wehrmacht's traditional emphasis on physical hardship as inherently character-building clashed directly with the practical operational reality of modern logistics requirements in industrial warfare. This institutional attitude reflected deeper cultural currents within German military tradition that went back generations. The Wehrmacht had inherited from Prussian military culture a fundamental valorization of hardship and suffering as character-building, viewing physical struggle as morally ennobling, while regarding mechanical assistance as potentially corrupting to martial virtue. American military culture, heavily influenced by industrial efficiency experts and modern business management practices, embraced the precisely opposite philosophy. Why deliberately waste precious human energy on repetitive tasks that machines could perform more efficiently and reliably? Save soldiers' strength and mental focus for tasks that only humans could effectively perform, such as tactical thinking, combat decision-making, and battlefield leadership. The Africa Corps faced another severe logistics challenge that widespread adoption of mechanical handling equipment could have substantially alleviated, namely the chronic shortage of adequate port capacity for receiving supplies from Europe. Tobruk, serving as the primary Axis port facility throughout North Africa, could handle only approximately 20,000 tons of supplies arriving monthly, falling catastrophically short of the 100,000 tons that the Africa Corps actually required to sustain operations at necessary intensity levels. This bottleneck resulted partly from limited physical dock space and port infrastructure, but stemmed primarily from the agonizingly slow pace of manual unloading methods employed by German and Italian forces. Cargo ships sat anchored in harbour for days, undergoing gradual unloading entirely by hand, when proper mechanical equipment could have cleared their holds in mere hours, freeing the vessels to return to Europe for additional cargo. American operations at North African ports under their control demonstrated conclusively what became possible when mechanical handling methods were properly implemented and supported. At Casablanca, American military engineers established comprehensive supply operations that moved 50,000 tons of cargo monthly through port facilities, where French colonial authorities, relying primarily on traditional manual labour methods, had previously managed only 10,000 tons under optimal conditions. The difference wasn't attributable solely to forklifts as isolated pieces of equipment, but rather to an entire integrated system designed around mechanical handling principles including pallet standardization, optimized warehouse layout, coordinated transport scheduling, and every element specifically optimized for mechanical operations rather than manual handling. The psychological impact on German troops proved profound and demoralizing in ways that couldn't be easily measured, but significantly affected morale. Letters written home by German soldiers, though subject to heavy military censorship that removed sensitive information, nevertheless revealed growing awareness among ordinary troops of overwhelming American material superiority. Soldiers wrote about watching American supply operations with reactions mixing amazement at the efficiency and growing despair about Germany's to compete with such methods. The sheer efficiency of American logistics operations, symbolized perfectly by the ubiquitous forklift, represented a form of warfare that Wehrmacht training and doctrine hadn't anticipated or prepared them to counter. By spring 1943, even Rommel himself, the legendary Desert Fox, had come to recognize the critical nature of the logistics crisis facing his forces. The general, renowned throughout both armies for his tactical brilliance and operational audacity, found himself increasingly constrained not primarily by Allied combat power on the battlefield, but by the simple inability to move adequate supplies efficiently from Mediterranean ports forward to his combat units. His urgent requests transmitted to Berlin asking for mechanical handling equipment faced the harsh reality that Germany fundamentally lacked both the industrial manufacturing capacity to produce such equipment in quantities that would make operational differences and, even more critically, the fuel supplies necessary to operate gasoline-powered equipment at the scale required. This chronic fuel shortage highlighted yet another significant advantage built into American electric forklift designs. While German motorized vehicles of all types competed desperately for extremely limited gasoline supplies, American electric forklifts operated entirely on battery power, recharged using electrical generators located at rear area installations where fuel supplies remained more plentiful and where consumption didn't directly compete with combat vehicles. A German truck employed for moving supplies forward consumed precious gasoline that could alternatively have powered a tank in combat operations, forcing brutal choices on logistics officers. An American electric forklift consumed electricity generated from fuel that had no viable alternative military use, eliminating such impossible choices. The Wehrmacht did in fact possess some mechanical handling equipment, consisting primarily of cranes and various hoisting devices located in rear areas within Germany proper and throughout occupied territories. But this equipment was neither standardized across units nor available in anything approaching the significant quantities that would have made operational differences. German industry had produced various types of lifting equipment over the years, but these consisted typically of large, specialized machines designed specifically for permanent factory installations or fixed dock facilities, not the versatile mobile forklifts that Americans deployed wherever supplies needed moving. Moreover, German military doctrine conceptualized such equipment as properly belonging to static permanent installations rather than mobile military field operations, a fundamental conceptual limitation. The battle fought at Medellin during March 1943 demonstrated vividly the cumulative operational effect of persistent logistics disparities between the two forces. Rommel's attack, destined to be his final offensive operation in Africa, failed partly due to critical ammunition shortages directly caused by chronically inefficient supply handling methods that couldn't keep pace with consumption. German artillery batteries found themselves running critically short of shells at crucial moments, while American and British forces, supplied through mechanically enhanced logistics systems, maintained sustained bombardments that never slackened for lack of ammunition. The fundamental mathematics of modern industrial warfare had turned decisively and irreversibly against any military force continuing to rely primarily on manual labor for essential logistics functions. As the Africa Corps retreated steadily westward through Libya and eventually into Tunisia under relentless pressure, they abandoned supply dumps scattered across the desert that told the complete story of their logistics failures to anyone who examined them carefully. Scattered, disorganized piles of equipment and supplies, much of it damaged during repeated manual handling, contrasted sharply with the neat, systematically palletized American supplies advancing methodically behind Allied forces. German soldiers desperately attempting to evacuate supplies during the retreat discovered that materials which had consumed days to unload laboriously by hand absolutely could not be quickly reloaded for withdrawal when time became critical, forcing abandonment of desperately needed supplies. The final surrender in Tunisia during May 1943 brought more than 230,000 Axis soldiers into Allied captivity, representing one of the war's largest mass surrenders. Among them were thousands of logistics personnel and supply specialists who would soon experience American supply methods firsthand as prisoners of war, their journey to prison camps located in the continental United States proving educational in ways the Wehrmacht leadership had never remotely intended. German prisoners transported across the Atlantic to America travelled in relative comfort compared to their expectations formed by propaganda about American brutality. Ships that might have carried commercial cargo were efficiently loaded with prisoners using organised embarkation procedures that minimised confusion. Upon arrival at major American ports like Norfolk, Virginia, and New York Harbor, prisoners witnessed forklift operations functioning at scales that utterly dwarfed anything they had observed in North Africa or anywhere else. These American ports routinely handled more total tonnage in a single day than major German ports managed during an entire week of intensive operations. At prison facilities like Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and numerous other POW camps scattered across the American interior, German prisoners assigned to various work details directly observed American logistics operations from the inside. They watched forklifts unload entire railroad cars packed with supplies in just hours, accomplishing tasks that would have consumed days using traditional German manual methods and massive labor gangs. Former logistics officers among the prisoner population, men who understood supply mathematics intimately, calculated that a single moderately sized American depot facility handled more total supplies on an average day than entire German divisions had managed to move during a week of maximum intensive operations. The prisoners also observed something that directly challenged fundamental Nazi racial ideology they had been taught to accept without question. Many forklift operators working at camps and nearby facilities were African Americans, members of segregated quartermaster units serving under the discriminatory policies then prevailing in American military forces. Despite facing systematic discrimination within American society itself, these black soldiers operated complex mechanical equipment with obvious skill and efficiency that Nazi racial theory explicitly claimed was impossible for supposedly inferior races to achieve. The mechanical advantage provided by proper forklift operation made the operator's race completely irrelevant to actual job performance. What mattered was skill in operating the machinery safely and efficiently, period. Some German prisoners were eventually assigned to work details at American warehouses and agricultural operations, where they learned firsthand to operate farming equipment and occasionally basic materials handling equipment under supervision. The transformation from initial skepticism to genuine appreciation proved remarkably rapid among most prisoners. Men who had initially dismissed mechanical handling as evidence of American physical weakness discovered through direct experience that such equipment allowed them to accomplish far more productive work while simultaneously preserving their physical energy for other tasks, a revelation that contradicted everything their training had taught them. The observations and experiences of these prisoners would later exert significant influence on German industrial practices during the post-war Reconstruction period. The sharp contrast with traditional German logistics methods became even more stark and undeniable as prisoners learned additional details about American production methods through conversations and observations. They discovered that American factories were manufacturing materials handling equipment in truly significant quantities, with each individual machine representing the cargo handling capacity equivalent to multiple manual workers. The same industrial base simultaneously producing this handling equipment was also producing trucks, tanks, aircraft, ships, and every other category of military equipment in quantities that seemed almost impossible to minds shaped by German resource scarcity and chronic shortages. The German military's persistent failure to appreciate and adopt mechanical handling equipment reflected much broader and deeper weaknesses embedded in German military culture that went beyond simple logistics. The cultural emphasis on will over material resources, spirit over technology, and tradition over innovation created massive blind spots in German military thinking that proved extremely costly across multiple domains. While German engineers created genuinely impressive advanced weapon systems like the V-2 rocket and jet aircraft that were ahead of their time, German military leadership simultaneously neglected the mundane but absolutely essential technologies that actually sustained ongoing military operations in the field day after day. This neglect extended well beyond just mechanical handling equipment. It embodied an entire flawed philosophy of warfare that valued abstract efficiency over hidebound tradition, practical pragmatism over rigid ideology, and measurable results over superficial appearances. Every single American forklift operating anywhere in North Africa represented a concrete statement that modern industrial war was won not by warrior spirit and willpower alone, but by industrial capacity intelligently and efficiently applied to practical problems. After Germany's final surrender in May 1945, the complete extent of the logistics disparity separating German and American methods became fully clear to investigators. Allied teams studying captured German military records and interviewing former Wehrmacht officers discovered that the German armed forces had never actually fully mechanized their logistics throughout the entire war, continuing to depend heavily on horses and manual labor even during the final desperate months. Even supposedly elite units like the Afrika Korps, portrayed endlessly in propaganda as representing fully mechanized modern warfare, had actually relied quite heavily on traditional manual handling methods for the vast majority of supply operations supporting combat forces. The Allied occupation of Germany following surrender provided an extended demonstration of American logistics methods operating at scale. American forces systematically employed their mechanical handling equipment to clear massive rubble piles from bombed cities, distribute food supplies to desperate civilian populations, and rebuild shattered infrastructure across the occupation zone. German civilians who had been told for years through propaganda about American weakness and decadence watched with their own eyes as American equipment accomplished in mere hours what German work crews required days to complete using traditional methods, a demonstration more convincing than any amount of propaganda could counter. The Marshall Plan, officially beginning in 1948, substantially accelerated German adoption of American logistics methods and industrial practices. American economic advisors didn't merely provide money and resources, but also transferred practical knowledge, including extensive training in industrial efficiency principles and mechanical handling techniques. German factories that had recently produced weapons and military equipment now began converting to produce industrial equipment for civilian reconstruction, frequently incorporating American design principles and methods learned from occupation authorities. The transformation from initial resistance to genuine enthusiasm proved remarkably swift considering the cultural obstacles. By 1950, West German companies were independently manufacturing their own materials handling equipment for domestic and export markets, with former Wehrmacht officers frequently involved in the industrial conversion effort bringing military logistics experience to civilian applications. These men had learned definitively through painful experience that mechanical handling represented not weakness but superior efficiency, a lesson they were determined to apply. They brought to German industry an almost evangelical enthusiasm for American logistics methods, absolutely determined that Germany would never again fall catastrophically behind in this crucial area that had contributed so significantly to military defeat. The Korean War beginning in 1950 provided an unexpected boost to German industrial recovery efforts. American forces, requiring additional equipment to support operations in Asia, contracted extensively with German manufacturers who could produce equipment to American specifications. The former enemy was now producing industrial equipment for its former conqueror, an ironic reversal that benefited both parties economically. German-made industrial goods, increasingly incorporating improvements and innovations on original American designs, began appearing prominently in international markets throughout the 1950s. By 1955, the transformation of West German industry had reached completion. West Germany had emerged as one of Europe's leading industrial producers across multiple sectors. German industrial equipment was being exported globally, competing successfully with American models in international markets across every continent. The student had not merely learned from the teacher, but was actively beginning to innovate and improve substantially upon the original lessons received. The founding of the Bundeswehr, West Germany's new armed forces, in 1955 incorporated hard-learned lessons about logistics that Wehrmacht officers had paid for with defeat. Mechanical handling equipment was now considered as fundamentally essential as weapons themselves within German military doctrine. Every Bundeswehr logistics unit was equipped from inception with modern materials handling equipment as standard issue. German soldiers received training to operate mechanical handling equipment as a basic military skill that every logistics specialist was expected to master. The contrast with traditional Wehrmacht doctrine and practice could not possibly have been more complete or dramatic. Industrial statistics compiled during this period told the compelling story of comprehensive transformation. Before the war, German warehouses and factory facilities had possessed minimal mechanical handling equipment of any kind. By 1960, West Germany had extensive mechanical handling systems in continuous operation throughout its industrial base. German industrial productivity, rebuilt consciously on fundamental principles of mechanical efficiency borrowed from American practices, was achieving sustained growth rates that impressed economic observers throughout Europe and beyond, contributing substantially to what became known as the German economic miracle. The philosophical transformation proved even more profound and lasting than the physical transformation of facilities and equipment. German industrial culture, once intensely proud of its traditional capacity for hard manual work and artisanal skill, now enthusiastically embraced mechanical assistance as the essential path to prosperity and international competitiveness. The work ethic that had once valorized physical effort and manual labor now valorized efficiency and productivity instead. Working smart decisively replaced working hard as the highest virtue in German industrial culture, a reversal that would have seemed inconceivable before the war. Veterans of the Africa Corps, many now working in various capacities within German industry, became vocal advocates for mechanical handling methods and efficiency principles. They spoke at industrial conferences, contributed articles to trade journals, and taught younger workers about the critical importance of logistics efficiency to national competitiveness. Their message remained remarkably consistent across all forums. Germany had lost the war not primarily on combat battlefields through tactical defeats, but in supply depots and logistics chains, where American mechanical efficiency had systematically overwhelmed German manual methods through superior productivity. By 1965, German engineering was beginning to genuinely excel in materials handling technology, moving beyond mere imitation. German engineers, drawing on their nation's traditional excellence in precision mechanical engineering, developed significant innovations in hydraulic systems, safety features, and ergonomic design elements. The German industrial sector was no longer simply copying American models, but creating genuinely original designs that established new international standards and pushed technological boundaries forward. The economic miracle of West Germany throughout the 1950s and 1960s was built substantially on logistics efficiency principles learned directly from American examples during occupation. German factories, equipped with increasingly advanced mechanical handling systems, achieved productivity levels that impressed international observers and competitors. Every piece of German materials handling equipment operating in these modern factories served as a tangible reminder of painful lessons learned through comprehensive military defeat. The contrast with East Germany under Soviet occupation proved highly instructive about the importance of logistics efficiency. Under heavy Soviet influence, East German industry continued to rely predominantly on manual labor methods, with mechanical handling viewed officially as capitalist luxury unsuitable for socialist economies. The productivity gap separating East and West Germany widened substantially with each passing year, with mechanical handling efficiency representing one of several key differentiating factors between the two economic systems applied to essentially identical populations. When German reunification finally arrived in 1990, East German workers expressed genuine amazement at discovering mechanical handling equipment considered standard in absolutely every West German facility they visited, representing technology gaps equivalent to decades. Military historians studying World War II logistics operations in depth have subsequently concluded that mechanical handling equipment, though decidedly unglamorous compared to tanks and aircraft that dominate popular imagination, ranked among the most important technologies affecting overall logistics efficiency during the conflict. The ability to move supplies efficiently from factories to front lines fundamentally influenced which armies could sustain intensive operations indefinitely, and which armies struggled with chronic logistics failures that constrained operations. The Wehrmacht, for all its undeniable tactical brilliance at operational and tactical levels, never successfully solved this fundamental equation of industrial logistics. The forklift's impact extended far beyond purely military applications to comprehensively reshape global commerce during the post-war era. The standardized pallet, designed specifically for efficient forklift handling, became recognized as the basic unit of international trade across all industries. Shipping containers, sized and designed for efficient mechanical handling, revolutionized maritime commerce and made possible the global supply chains defining modern economies. The integrated global economy that emerged throughout the decades following World War II was built substantially on foundations of efficient materials, handling methods pioneered for military necessity. Modern military forces universally recognize mechanical handling as absolutely essential to effective operations without exception. No major military force anywhere today would remotely consider relying primarily on manual labor for logistics operations, a transformation that would have seemed radical in 1943. The fundamental lesson demonstrated conclusively by American mechanical efficiency throughout North Africa has been thoroughly absorbed by military establishments worldwide. Mechanical advantage in logistics operations is recognized as equally important as firepower superiority in direct combat, a principle now considered self-evident. The German experience, spanning from initial dismissal to comprehensive adoption, represents one of history's most complete transformations in industrial philosophy and military culture. A military establishment that had dismissed mechanical handling as evidence of enemy weakness came to embrace identical technology as essential to both military effectiveness and economic power. This transformation required not merely adopting new technology and equipment, but changing fundamental cultural beliefs about strength, work, and efficiency that had persisted for generations. Today's German logistics industry stands recognized as highly advanced, characterized by continuous innovation and operational efficiency that sets international standards. German companies produce sophisticated mechanical handling equipment exported globally. German logistics expertise is marketed internationally through consulting services and equipment sales to customers worldwide. The nation that once dismissed mechanical materials handling with contempt has become acknowledged as a global leader in precisely this technology, an ironic reversal lost on nobody. The symbolism resonates powerfully across the decades, separating us from those events. The forklift, that deceptively simple machine consisting essentially of two metal prongs and hydraulic lifting mechanism, challenged not just German armies on African battlefields, but German fundamental assumptions about the essential nature of strength and efficiency in modern industrial society. It demonstrated conclusively that true power emerges not from human muscle alone, but from human intelligence creatively applied to achieve mechanical advantage, multiplying individual capability. The Wehrmacht learned this essential lesson far too late to avoid comprehensive military defeat, but absorbed it thoroughly enough to ensure the lesson would never be forgotten by subsequent generations. In military museums scattered across contemporary Germany, carefully preserved examples of American equipment from World War II are displayed prominently alongside tanks and aircraft that typically dominate such exhibits. These utilitarian machines, decidedly unglamorous and purely functional, tell a story every bit as important as any celebrated combat vehicle on display. They serve to remind visitors that wars are ultimately won not just through courage and tactical skill, but through the unglamorous efficiency of moving supplies from point A to point B more effectively than the enemy can manage. The final lesson emerging from this history proves both simple and profound in its implications. Nations that dismiss technological innovation as weakness or decadence do so at their genuine peril in ways that may not become apparent until too late. German officers who casually dismissed American mechanical equipment in 1942 could never have imagined these unglamorous machines would contribute so substantially to their eventual comprehensive defeat. They perceived mechanical assistance as decadence when it actually represented evolution toward greater efficiency. They valued traditional strength and manual capability, while their enemies systematically multiplied strength through intelligent technology application. The transformation became undeniable by the 1970s, when German manufacturers were selling advanced equipment internationally in direct competition with American producers. The circle had closed completely. The student had become the accomplished master, but the fundamental lesson remained powerfully relevant. Never dismiss an innovation simply because it appears to make work easier or less physically demanding. In modern warfare and modern industry alike, making work easier translates directly into accomplishing more with less resources, and those who accomplish more with fewer resources gain decisive advantage over competitors still using traditional methods. Standing in any modern German warehouse today, watching sophisticated automated equipment move goods with computerized precision that would have seemed like science fiction to soldiers in 1943, it becomes difficult to imagine that such machines were once dismissed as unnecessary by professional military officers who should have known better. Yet that dismissal, rooted deeply in cultural assumptions and traditional thinking that prized suffering over results, contributed measurably to Germany's logistics challenges throughout World War II in ways that affected combat operations. The Wehrmacht that dismissed mechanical handling was ultimately defeated substantially by the superior efficiency such equipment represented, though this remained just one factor among many. The victory of mechanical efficiency proved incremental but absolutely decisive over time. No monuments were erected to commemorate materials handling excellence. No medals were struck celebrating logistics efficiency improvements. Yet mechanical handling methods changed warfare fundamentally by demonstrating that in industrial conflict between modern nations, the side that moves supplies most efficiently gains significant operational advantage that compounds over time. This lesson, learned painfully in North African deserts where German soldiers exhausted themselves manually while American equipment worked continuously without tiring, resonates clearly in every modern military logistics operation conducted anywhere today. The story of German attitudes toward mechanical handling serves ultimately as a cautionary tale about the genuine dangers of dismissing innovation that challenges comfortable cultural assumptions and traditional practices. The Wehrmacht entered World War II supremely confident that German discipline and physical strength would overcome American mechanical methods that seemed to represent softness. They discovered instead that mechanical assistance multiplied human capability in ways that no amount of discipline could possibly match or overcome through willpower alone. Mechanical handling didn't replace human strength or eliminate the need for capable soldiers. It amplified human capability exponentially, allowing each individual to accomplish far more. Understanding this crucial distinction earlier might have substantially changed German logistics practices and possibly affected campaign outcomes. The legacy continues shaping global supply chains operating today. Every efficiently handled load in contemporary commerce, every shipping container moved through modern port facilities, every warehouse operating with mechanical precision throughout the world traces its developmental lineage directly to the logistics evolution that occurred during World War II. The mechanical handling that German officers dismissed so contemptuously in North Africa became the essential foundation enabling global commerce at scales previously impossible. In that dramatic transformation from military necessity to commercial ubiquity lies the complete vindication of the efficient logistics philosophy Americans pioneered. Today, as automation and robotics transform logistics yet again in ways that would astound observers from even a generation ago, the fundamental lesson remains powerfully relevant to military planners. Military forces that dismiss emerging technologies as unnecessary complications or expensive luxuries risk falling into logistics inefficiency that constrains operations. The side that moves supplies most efficiently maintains crucial advantage, whether those supplies move by traditional forklifts or cutting-edge automated systems barely requiring human intervention. The German journey from dismissing to enthusiastically embracing mechanical handling teaches that military superiority requires substantially more than advanced weapons systems and brave soldiers willing to sacrifice. It requires embracing innovations that multiply human capability, even when those innovations challenge traditional concepts about what constitutes proper soldiering and military virtue. The Wehrmacht failed catastrophically to learn this lesson in time to avoid defeat across multiple theatres. Their successors in post-war Germany learned it so thoroughly and completely that Germany became an international leader in the very technology Wehrmacht officers had once dismissed with contempt. In the end, mechanical efficiency proved genuinely decisive in logistics operations, not through direct combat engagement, but through the inexorable mathematics of supply efficiency compounding daily. While German soldiers exhausted themselves moving supplies manually using methods their grandfathers would have recognized, American mechanical methods moved vast quantities of material that sustained Allied armies advancing across entire continents. Simple machines had contributed substantially to changing modern warfare, teaching a lesson about industrial conflict that remains valid decades later. In industrial war between modern nations, mechanical advantage in logistics provides crucial benefits that determine which armies can sustain operations and which cannot. The transformation proved thorough and lasting, the lesson absorbed completely, the technology adopted enthusiastically and ultimately refined significantly by those who had initially rejected it so completely. Germany's journey from dismissing mechanical handling as weakness to becoming recognized as a leader in materials handling technology represents one of history's most notable reversals in military and industrial culture. In that profound reversal lies wisdom remaining valuable for any military force or nation competing in the modern world. Dismissing innovation because it challenges traditional assumptions about strength, work, or efficiency can prove extraordinarily costly in ways that may not become apparent until far too late to matter. The price of such dismissal, as Wehrmacht logistics officers discovered in the unforgiving deserts of North Africa, contributed significantly to logistics failure and ultimate comprehensive defeat that might have been avoided through earlier adoption of available technology.